Okay, how does this one fare, and does it get any like positive points with bringing back Heckle? This episode is basically the we're sorry we screwed up in Dino Charge that didn't have Heckle become a ranger that he should have at the end of the series. But the way he was brought into the show abruptly, Cosmic Fury has had this problem of they love to explain things a lot, in some cases repeat themselves multiple times, but in this case where it was kind of important to actually see how Heckle came back, because thanks to Dino Charge being in an alternate reality, there's a lot of stuff that would have had to happen. And how does Mick have that temporal device that Time Force made? So you have a lot of questions on how Heckle came to here. Now, I don't mind he was able to sneak his way into Zed's ranks. Everyone that knew he turned good, Sledge and everyone, long dead, and plus he's from a different dimension, so they don't know who he is. This alone could have been an entire episode with Tarek and Mick and Heckle, them figuring out what they could do back on Earth, and then Mick goes, well, I know someone that I can get a hold of. Maybe they can help. And then we find out how Mick got a hold of the temporal device. Maybe the Time Force had met him at some point, or maybe Billy gave him a temporal device. But besides that, the episode overall was pretty straightforward. Like, we finally got back to Earth after all this stuff on different planets, and they finally dealt with the Zord anti-shield thing around Earth, and they bring back a lot of the old characters. One of the bigger important things that came from this episode is, what is Zayto? Because we didn't get any straight answers when Zayto came back alive. And this brought up a ton of problems with fans. So this was the big moment of what is actually Zayto. This was good in two reasons. One, there's a constant problem with Power Rangers and consequences. A prime example was Kendrix. Kendrix died to save her team, Cassie, and to stop Cycle Pink. She died. And then at the end of Lost Galaxy, she came back to life. Second, this deals with everyone's complaint when Trini died in Once and Always. Well, if the Morphing Masters can bring back Zayto from the life, why didn't they bring back Trini? We now know that Zayto's life is temporary. They kind of pulled basically what Zordon did with Tommy's Green Ranger powers. He had to infuse his own energy in order to restore the power coin. Basically, Zayto, when he died in the Zord explosion, he died. And that energy is slowly running out. He will permanently die eventually. This solves a whole bunch of issues, and also potential issues from in past episodes, or why didn't the Morphing Master save them in the past, or any potential future episodes if they ever get made. Now, since Ollie didn't appear in this episode, I think this is a good place to talk about what was going on behind the scenes. I didn't even know about this, but people had told me in comments that there was a scheduling conflict and Kai Moya was busy with some other things. So that was the main reason why Ollie became an evil ranger. A lot of storylines used that really well, and I didn't really have a problem with Ollie becoming an evil Blue Ranger again. And when they initially did it, you think oh wow, they're gonna finally showcase what really an evil ranger can be, because we had Tommy, we had Ryan, we had Trent, and nothing happened, which I don't understand. You were in this unique position with Power Rangers where this is the type of show that actually helps when an actor's unavailable. This happened back in Dino Thunder with JDF, so they had him stuck in the suit, but he'd recorded all his voice lines. Why did the writers take advantage of this situation where Ollie decided to stay within his ranger suit? Maybe Zed didn't like seeing him as human, or it was his way of trying to disconnect him from being human. And then they could have just continued that story plot point on with him fighting the Rangers more often, building that evil side, overtaking them. They pretty much filmed it like they would have, all right, Kai is unavailable, so when he does become available, we'll film all his stuff later on, and that's the reason why he doesn't interact with the main cast members. It's always cutting away. You could have done a lot more with Ollie's character being evil, and on top of it, it helps what the show turned into, because the later productions of Power Rangers admitted that we rarely film the civilian fights now, because it just makes filming much faster, because you have the actors just act and you have the Rangers fight. So then you can do multiple things at once and you can complete episodes much faster. And probably other ratings issues, because I know in other countries they would censor the civilian fights. I don't know why. They were so much more stricter on PR than compared to America. So it influenced the show, but it was like you had a perfect chance of expanding on Ollie, keeping him in the suit. We're 7 episodes in, and we get hardly any of his evil side. It's rushed through. There are good moments here and there, but overall, it's just blown. If they had expanded on Ollie's role, the only real change they would have had to have done was just remove his mother's scene, and then they could have just continued on. As for Heckyle, because this was a big, contentious thing with fans, and I didn't like it either. We went through this entire crazy Dino Charge season, and, you know, Heckyle / Snide was a really kind of a potential at the beginning of season 2, and then they blew it with him, so fans were pissed off. I was pissed off, and then we had this big revelation of the Energems and the Dark Energem and this whole time travel thing. Heckyle redeemed himself. He turned a good guy. It was cool that they thought of this idea of bringing Heckyle back. It works into the story. You know, previous villain that they don't know anything about, he can sneak in, trick people. Ryan Carter, I always liked the actor. He did a really good job in Dino Charge. It was cool to see him fight for at least that little bit of moment, and really nice to see the missing suit that Dino Charge didn't use, although it was slightly modified in this case. I think the helmet was mainly changed. You know, overall, the episode, I think, is well done. It's well paced. Tarek actually got a couple of scenes, which I was surprised because, you know, I was like, wow, he's able to actually fight. I thought they were just going to completely ignore him, but everyone had their places in there, and of course, like, the big conundrum of, like, Zayto didn't want to tell anyone the truth. He knew it from the very beginning that, you know, he had a limited amount of time. And I understand that from a standpoint, it's just like there's been so much crap going on. Zayto didn't want anyone to worry about even more stuff on top of all this. You know, their parents are in danger, the world's in danger. For this episode, those were the best moments. I'm really torn with this season because the writers can use the show to their advantage in a lot of ways. Like, I wouldn't have thought of using Grid Battle Force's teleporting devices. They actually wanted to apologize, basically, to fans. And, you know, we kind of screwed up with Dino Charge. We should have had Heckle's suit, but, you know, it was between rights issues, time. But on the other hand, they're screwing up in the places of Ollie. What's the point of having an evil Blue Ranger and not doing anything with it? Can you imagine if this happened in Green with Evil, where, you know, we bring in the Green Ranger, he turns evil, and then he disappears for like 4 of the 5 episodes, or doesn't really do anything? We went backwards in Power Rangers quality in this area. The writers had a hell of a time in adapting the Ranger footage for Green with Evil, because there was so many multiple episodes on more footage that they couldn't use with Geki and Burai and all the other Rangers. That's why we really didn't have that much Green Ranger footage. On top of, they have to introduce us to Scorpina, so that's taking time. There was a lot of more complicated stuff that they had to figure out to do back in MMPR, and again, you know, Cosmic Fury has a ton of leeway, and they just waste Ollie like this. Like, oh, well, Ollie's just a bad guy, and he's just doing something off screen again, and, oh, I just figured out a plan. I can now go to the Cosmic Fury Rangers and fight them, and then just losing in 5 minutes and go away again. That's the thing that's just grinding away. Every time we see a new episode, it's just like, there's just going to be 10. They can't really do anything with Billy. They can't really do anything with Mick. They can't do anything with Ollie. It's just this back and forth where one episode, they use the time really well, but there's other episodes where it's just like, you wasted this, this, and this. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. For story progression, it was done well. They used lore, past episodes, past characters right. We got to see the city again. The linking bits, the characters, they're all crushed and squished in order to get the plot going, and it just sucks. One thing I will say, though, is that this is the first time they actually used the Q Ranger footage really well. So if they hadn't thrown them into different locations where they had to cut them off, the Q Ranger footage would have been used much better. So, okay, we have this big, you know, Zayto problem building up. A decent episode. We got Heckyle to come back. I'm a little bit more invigorated to see what's up in the next episode.